The holiday season continues, so let's see what we have wrapped up this time. Hey, look, it's yet another non-Christmas movie. You know, as a YouTuber, I have to say, I'm not really doing a good job at getting those December viewers, because usually YouTuber will do a bunch of Christmas movies to celebrate the holidays. But me, nah. Instead, we're gonna talk about Peter Rabbit, based on the Beatrix Potter illustrations and featuring the always subtle James Corden. You know, I have to say, among this era of taking children's cartoons and animated books and turning them into live-action CGI hybrids, I didn't really expect Peter Rabbit to come out of them. But I guess after they did Garfield and Alvin and the Chipmunks and Rocky and Bullwinkle and The Grinch and The Cat in the Hat and Yogi Bear, I guess they were probably running out of options. So why not do Peter Rabbit, the always beautiful, contemporary, soft Peter Rabbit from the studio that brought you the Emoji Movie.
Directed by Will Gluck, this Sony animation production is a live-action hybrid of the Peter Rabbit characters, with actors Rose Byrne and Domhnall Gleeson interacting as the neighbors. In fact, the entire story revolves around the antics of Thomas and the Rabbit, who fight for the attention of Bee, with Peter fearing the loss of his motherly figure to a British man who hates the bunnies. It's simple enough, but I've been through these kinds of adaptations in the past, even with Sony's own first two Smurfs films. I know what to expect at this point, and it's typically an attempt to pander to an audience who grew up with the original interpretations of the characters, as well as their children. This usually fails because by making everything so modern and hip, they lose the essence of the original material. Peter Rabbit kind of has the same problem, with the character being miscast by the energetic and loud James Corden, and the entire film has a slapstick quality to it. However, strangely enough, despite the numerous modern songs that are heard and the silly vibe of it all, the overall production design and animation really stay true to the original material. The characters are very well integrated into the real-world environments, and though it takes place in modern times, the country location helps to take us to a timeless world as presented in Potter's original tales. I do find it amusing that Walt Disney attempted to get the rights to Peter Rabbit back in the late 30s, but she declined, probably fearing what the studio could possibly do to her creation. Yet in 2018, Sony instead turned it into a goofy comedy. I don't know what Potter purists will think of this. Based on the reaction the trailer had when it first hit the internet, I assume most people wouldn't be pleased with an idea like this, no matter how much it respected the material. From my point of view, as someone who didn't really grow up with Peter Rabbit, I think it takes a different direction for the tone, but it still pays tribute to the classic while also respecting it. I mean, there's been other adaptations that stay more close to the source material. If you really need something better, it already previously existed, so I don't really have a problem with a live-action hybrid, especially when it's miles better than some other similar adaptations in the last 2 decades. I give credit to Will Gluck, who's a bit of an underrated talent in Hollywood, having been the director of the remarkably entertaining Easy A and a serviceable adaptation of Annie. Every project he takes, there seems to be an audience response of caution. The Annie movie was talked down for months before it was released, and Peter Rabbit's trailer was lambasted, but his work always manages to prove a lot of initial criticism wrong. It's just too bad he hasn't been more successful. The slapstick works, and that's the best compliment you can give. If these moments didn't work, you'd lose a majority of the comedy. But I really find every physical moment to be a good landing, which is pretty rare for a family film. Domhnall Gleeson is so enjoyable as Thomas, really yucking it up and determined. But instead of being a bad guy who doesn't deserve the girl, he actually has some good chemistry with Rose Byrne. He can be a genuine guy and everything works out in the end only because he changes his own personal faults. That's a nice twist on the typical story of a supporting character dating an evil person and doesn't realize it until the good guy proves it. In fact, the good guy here is Peter Rabbit, and he has his own flaws that need to be shed and outgrown. Nothing really complex, but much different from the tropes I've seen before. I don't think James Corden was a good choice for Peter Rabbit, but I've always had a soft spot for the Late Late Show host, so I can't complain too much here. He's much better than when he was in Smallfoot or the Emoji Movie. We even have extra vocal work from Margot Robbie and Daisy Ridley, which, as a fan, was a real treat. There's one particular joke involving a rooster that had me dying every time. He lets out a crow every morning, but since we can hear the animal voices, you find out he's just screaming about the sun, terrified that it keeps rising, when the night before, he thought it was the end of the world. He even mentions that he fertilized a bunch of eggs and now regrets it since the world hasn't actually ended, so now he's stuck with all these kids. And then later we see a bunch of his kids attached to his hip as he just sits there exhausted. Okay, that's just plain funny.
The sun came up again! If I knew this was gonna keep happening, certainly wouldn't have fertilized all those eggs. Now, I have to stick around till they hatch.
It's not a world-changing project, but it does enough to surprise me as an audience member, tired of these live-action hybrids that should have been fully animated. In fact, there's a few sequences that are fully animated in this movie, utilizing the style of the original books. Of course I love this stuff, but honestly, for the kind of story this had, I think it made enough of an excuse to be presented this way. I expected to dislike this, yet here I am, only thinking about the stuff that works and the humor that ran throughout. Peter Rabbit finally takes a doomed idea and turns it into something wonderful. You've won this round, Sony. Thanks to Ryan for this Patreon request, and thanks to all my Patreon supporters. For only $7, you can get your own monthly movie review. Ask me to review anything I haven't already. There's also other perks like blogs, exclusive videos, and early access. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And thanks so much for watching this video.